Morning, President Trump touts a trade deal with a major trading partner.
The largest trade deal in history, I think maybe the largest deal in history with Japan.
We're starting to get a string of deals, the biggest one being this U.S.-Japan deal. Let's go through some of the things that are in this.
We are following some breaking news as it relates to the Trump presidency. I want to transition your screen to give you a live look at the White House as we're learning a massive $550 billion trade deal has been reached with Japan.
This isn't your run-of-the-mill trade scuffle. It's a turbocharged collision course between Washington and Tokyo that's threatening to upend the global auto industry. What's brewing here is more than just a disagreement over dollars and duties. It's a full-throttle standoff with consequences that could rattle economies, disrupt jobs, and change what rolls off assembly lines for years to come. Let's be clear. This isn't just a story about tariffs. It's about people. About workers in Alabama building engines, families in Ohio stitching car seats, and millions of Americans deciding whether they can afford their next car. It's about innovation, international pressure, and a fight for dominance in the future of mobility. Welcome to the ultimate trade showdown, where Japanese automakers are suddenly in the hot seat and the United States, led by President Trump, is steering toward a dramatic 25% tariff under Section 232. And Japan? They're scrambling to slam the brakes before this turns into a pileup. Since late 2024, tension has been steadily climbing. What started with a 10% baseline tariff under America's Liberation Day economic plan has now snowballed into a potential 25% import duty that could target Japanese cars head-on. Behind the scenes, Japan's top envoy, Ryo Akasaka, has been making urgent trips to Washington, trying to steer negotiations back on course before the critical July 9, 2025 deadline. But progress? It's stalled. Why? Rice. Yes, rice, Japan's refusal to open up its domestic rice market has become a stubborn roadblock. And President Trump isn't backing down, calling Japan's auto exports unfair and signaling even harsher penalties if talks collapse. It's no longer a quiet diplomatic exchange. It's a political thunderstorm with global implications. And make no mistake, Japanese car makers aren't some distant corporate giants. They're woven into the American economy. Toyota, Honda, Nissan, Subaru, and the Mazda Toyota venture collectively power a massive $170 billion machine, one that stretches from southern steel towns to Midwest tech hubs. These automakers don't just sell cars, they build communities. Nearly 3.4 million vehicles were assembled in U.S. factories in 2023 alone. In total, Japanese brands moved over 6.3 million cars across American roads last year. That translated into nearly $170 billion in revenue and over $31 billion in corporate payroll and tax contributions. But now, the gears are grinding. A recent Bank of Japan report shows that confidence among these automakers is slipping. Worries are growing from dealers to factory floors to investors. There's real fear that this tariff war could ripple through entire industries, triggering layoffs, delays, and price hikes. And let's talk about your wallet, because if this hits, it won't just be news, it'll be personal. That SUV you are eyeing, the sleek hybrid you've been saving for, expect sticker shock. Tariffs this big will jack up prices, cut into production, and squeeze supply chains from Tokyo to Texas. In short, Japan controls nearly half, 44% of America's light vehicle market. That's huge. And if this storm hits full force, it won't just shift the auto industry, it could spin it into chaos. President Trump made it blunt. We've spoken with many countries, and we're simply going to tell them what they'll have to pay if they want access to the American market. Imagine waking up to a letter that changes everything. Not a policy memo, not a press release, but a blunt message from the president himself. Congratulations, you're paying 25%. That's exactly what President Trump announced on social media this past Monday afternoon. No ceremony, no negotiations, just a digital decree that Japan would be the first to face a sweeping 25% tariff on car imports, with an equally heavy levy on auto parts, all set to hit by May 3rd, 2025. And just like that, the countdown begins. If this plan goes through, the average price of a vehicle in America could skyrocket by $4,400. That's not just a number. It's the difference between a new car and a used one, between an upgrade and sticking with your old ride for another 5 years. For automakers already walking a financial tightrope, it's a nightmare. Toyota's profits hover at 7.1%, Honda's at 5.6%, and Nissan is barely holding on at 4.3%. The pressure is mounting fast. In fact, Toyota has already hiked prices by $270 just in anticipation. And it gets worse. This new parts tariff isn't just targeting random bits and bolts. It's going after the beating heart of every vehicle. Engines, transmissions, onboard electronics, all the things that make a modern car, well, a car. So what happens now? If companies pass the cost on to you, sales could tank. If they don't, their profits bleed. And that could mean layoffs, factory closures, or shipping operations overseas to stay afloat. No matter how you spin it, someone's paying the price. And here's where it really hits home. Jobs. Japanese automakers aren't foreign invaders, they're deeply rooted in the US economy. We're talking over 500,000 American jobs, 96,000 in manufacturing, 226,000 in supply chains, 113,000 in supporting roles, and 17,000 corporate positions. These aren't just statistics, they're families, communities, livelihoods. Altogether, these jobs pump $93 billion into the US economy every year.
In states like Alabama, Kentucky, and Mississippi, Japanese automakers don't just employ, they anchor entire regions. In some areas, they represent 1 in 5 factory jobs. Analysts warn that if these tariffs trigger downsizing, regional unemployment could spike by up to 2.6 percentage points. That's the kind of shock that turns thriving towns into ghost towns. And it doesn't stop there. The U.S. Congressional Budget Office has run the numbers, and the outlook is grim. If Japanese production in the U.S. slows, federal tax revenues could drop by up to $62 billion over just 3 years. Money meant for infrastructure, healthcare, education. Investors are already jumping ship. As of May 2025, Japanese auto stocks have plunged nearly 22% year on year. Nervous money is flowing into tech and healthcare, seeking safer ground. But beyond the spreadsheets and earnings calls lies a sobering truth. This is about people, about parents who might lose their jobs, about small-town schools funded by factory taxes, about diners, gas stations, and hardware stores that rely on a bustling local economy. If those jobs vanish, so does the support system for entire communities. This isn't just a bump in the road. It's a full-blown threat to the very backbone of America's auto industry, its intricate, powerful, and deeply interwoven supplier networks. The U.S. automotive sector isn't just about big brands and car showrooms. It runs on a $1.3 trillion ecosystem that stretches from steel foundries and software labs to seat manufacturers and logistics firms. And Japanese automakers are one of its biggest engines. Look at the numbers. Toyota's Kentucky assembly lines rely on 72% US-made components. Honda's Ohio-based Marysville plant clocks in at 68%, and Nissan's Smyrna facility sits at 58%. These aren't just foreign companies, they're deeply American in operation, sourcing heavily from local suppliers. But a proposed 25% tariff on critical imports like engines, batteries, and electronic systems? That's a wrecking ball aimed directly at this delicate machinery. Experts warn it could double the cost of building complex automotive systems, slamming not just Toyota, Honda, or Nissan, but nearly 197,000 American workers employed by Kaizen-trained, lean-certified suppliers built on the legendary Toyota production system. The risk? What analysts call reverse industrialization syndrome, a rapid collapse in production capacity. If suppliers can't pivot quickly to new clients, entire segments of the supply chain could fall apart. That means more than just lost jobs. It means decades of collaborative innovation with regional schools, research hubs, and tech labs could be undone almost overnight. Even small gains like the 0.22% boost in productivity from supplier clustering could vanish. And while some smaller Tier 2 and Tier 3 suppliers are scrambling to diversify locations, real change takes time, funding, and most critically, stability. Right now, that's in short supply. The ripple effects? They don't stop at factory gates. They hit you, the buyer. Japanese automakers dominate the US market for hybrids and compact SUVs. They build 3 out of every 5 hybrids and 2 out of every 3 subcompact SUVs sold in America. A sudden 25% tariff could send hybrid prices soaring up by $4,400 per vehicle. That's not just a price tag, that's the death knell for some families' next car purchase. Many might abandon hybrids altogether, turning to older used cars or cheaper gas-guzzling trucks, slowing the nation's already fragile transition to greener, cleaner transportation. Sure, American giants like Ford and GM are gunning for an all-electric future, but launching EV lines takes time, at least 22 months to get a new plant rolling. In the meantime, higher vehicle costs could stoke inflation fears and shake consumer confidence, potentially dropping it by 6 to 8 points, putting even more pressure on the Federal Reserve as it tries to land the economy gently. Analysts from JP Morgan to Brookings agree. Tariffs might push some reshoring under the USMCA agreement, but the trade-off could be crippling. We're talking about higher car prices, broken supply chains, and a detour on the road to electrification. With the July 9, 2025 deadline looming like a check engine light, the US-Japan Auto Alliance is staring down a defining crossroads. Yes, a tariff might trim the trade deficit, but at what cost? You could be jeopardizing 500,000 American jobs, $30 billion in tax revenue, a $1.3 trillion supply chain, and worst of all, America's edge in automotive innovation. This is the exact moment when the world is accelerating toward electric, sustainable mobility, and the US risks stalling out. We could see delayed hybrid rollouts, supply shortages, rising prices, and a devastating ripple from Wall Street portfolios to small-town diners that rely on factory workers. So the real question isn't whether this story will grab headlines, it's whether it'll set the US auto industry back a decade. Will Japan start pulling out of the US market? Can American suppliers actually scale up in time? Or are we driving full speed into a long-term decline? And most importantly, what about you? Would you pay $4,400 more for a hybrid? Or will this tariff push you toward a different choice? Maybe even force you to delay your purchase altogether? This isn't just a trade spat. It's a tipping point for American workers, car buyers, and the future of green mobility. The decisions made in the coming weeks won't just affect bottom lines. They'll shape the road ahead for an entire generation. So, what do you think? Can the US and Japan find a way to keep the engine running? Or are we headed for a breakdown that no one's ready for?